Yeah, we don't. He could have a little bit of sidewall damage there to the car that could be affecting his aerodynamics just a little bit. But here comes Doug thinking about a move to the outside, going down into the chicane. He's going to have to be very brave to do it, and pulls it off. Oh, yoy, you can't get a whole lot closer than that. My goodness gracious.
Let's take a look at this from the hood, because this is where Partridge needs to change his pants, and Kinchler probably does too after he saw what happened in his mirrors. But Partridge comes in too hot, clips that inside curve, gets unsettled, then he's on the brakes. We're going to go in slow-mo here to see how close it was, and it was very close.
Yeah, the top three have been an incredible fight. Oh man.
Gently does it, boys, as they make their way down. They bang wheels. Oh, Sebastian Tixier, he goes tumbling over. Trengarade going off the circuit. Goodness gracious. Looked like Jim Shedlick went off the track in sympathy there.
This is the view that he has going through. He sees a couple lights in the distance, trying to get it rejoined.
Oh, that's not good. Careful, boys, careful. Too wide coming up, Eau Rouge. And the loser there is going to be Vaughn, as Karthik Pai keeps his foot in it. Vaughn going to lose another position there to Mika Lino, and Lino going to go for a 2-for-1 as they come down the Kemmel Straight. He has got such massive overspeed. Look at that move from the number 5 machine.
Good morning, everyone. I'm going to ride around the world.
I'm Mick Claridge, and I'm going to ride around the world on my bike.
My son, he gave me advice at the start of this ride, and he looked at me and just said, "Dad, don't be a moron."
Let me do my animal signal to gain their respect. How's it going, Sally? Yeah, I'm alright, Mick. How's it going? Worse than that bit in Lord of the Rings where they go into the top and the spider's in the tunnel. I'm just hoping there's a spider at the top of this one to kill me. Freezing.
And I failed. I moroned up the ride.
Seifert, Prost, Verstappen. What do those drivers all have in common? They all have won the Austrian Grand Prix during its history, whether at the Zeltweg Air Base or at the facility we're at now today, known as the Red Bull Ring. Today, the Major Series looks to add its own drivers to its history today, as this is the Austrian Grand Prix live on the Global Sim Racing channel. Hello everyone, and welcome to the 9th race of the European region's Pro Split season, live from iRacing's virtual Red Bull Ring. My name's Justin Prince. Alongside the booth today is Jake Sperry and Christian Challenger. Behind the scenes is our director Zach Johnson, and he's using cameras provided by the great Dougie Beard. Today brings us to Spielberg, Austria, where plenty of intense moments have happened throughout its history. Let's learn more about today's venue with our GSRC track guide.
Welcome to the Red Bull Ring. Located near Spielberg, Austria, this track began life in a much more fast and sweeping format. Having gone through multiple different owners, it eventually was snatched up by Red Bull and has its 3 different layouts you see today. While they range roughly between 1 to 2.5 miles in length, the thing they hold in common are fast straights, hard braking zones, and very few corners. In fact, the longest and most common layout, the Grand Prix course, has only 9 of them. Spots like Remus and Gosser are the most popular corners for overtakes, but both involve dramatic elevation changes. Each have their perils. Remus tends to see drivers make contact when the blind cutback often goes wrong. whereas Gosser tempts you into braking far too late, and the downhill nature shoots cars miserably into the gravel. A few swift bends still scatter the track, with turns like Lauda, Rent, or A1 really testing a driver's accuracy at high speeds. However, most of them don't send you off into the grass. Rather, there is a lot of paved runoff. But they often include some nasty curves most cars will want to avoid hitting, as they've been known to damage suspension and undertrays. A variety of types of racing compete here, with everything from lower Formula open-wheelers to motorcycles, touring cars, and all the way up to Formula One holding events regularly. Set among the gorgeously picturesque Alps, and including great racing on a challenging and history-rich circuit, it's easy to see why fans and drivers are both eager every time they come for a race.
That's a look at your GSRC track guide for Red Bull Ring here in Austria. Now I turn to you, Jake, because today's racetrack brings us to a facility known for plenty of intriguing racing, but it's also today being raced at with the Mercedes-AMG W12 E-Performance. What can you tell us about today's track and car combination, especially knowing how integral it's been when it comes to the World Championship in Formula One in the recent years?
Well, this is the sort of circuit that actually fell off of the Formula One calendar, and then the moment it fell off of the calendar, it fell into disrepair. It was thanks to the work that Red Bull did that actually got this circuit back into racing and actually got it into an amazing place where you can go out and you can really battle, and this has proven over the years to be so integral in terms of the last 3 years, because they've hosted 6 races in Formula One in the last 3 years, 2 double headers and then a sprint and feature format just over the last week. So there is certainly a lot that you can gain and gather from this circuit. But the key to today, yes, it's 9 turns. Yes, it's 4.32 kilometers. The key today is track limits. They are going to be very close. They're going to be very tight. They've only got 15. And I will say this unequivocally, there is an iRacing Grand Prix series, which runs officially every week. And they went here, and 17 was a massive, massive troublemaker for half the distance of this race. So I think track limits are going to be huge. The other huge thing is watch out for drivers spinning off for the exits of corners. This is one of the very few circuits, Justin, where elevation change happens right on the point of acceleration.
That's going to be something to absolutely watch for when it comes to this racetrack here today. As we get ready to see how drivers fare out, let's see how the driver standings have been faring out coming into today. Because for those who watched the World 600, Dallas Pataska was able to reel in the gap to Sean Campbell to 108 points. Campbell has led a majority of the way with 6 victories and 8 starts. Jamie Conway, who started off the season with a victory, is still in third in the point standings, about 50 points ahead of Ross Banfield. Chris Barrett rounding out the top 5. Thomas Cope, who had strong success at Daytona earlier this year, in 6th. Bobrovsky, Freitas, along with Monerwich and Baker, the top 10. Meanwhile, when it comes to the sportsman's side, Brian Boomstra has been bringing the boom in what has been a very dominant performance from if you're an NRG racing driver or a Bright Esports driver. 9 of the 10 spots in the top 10 controlled by them. Boomstra with a 69-point advantage over Garen Batten. Alexander Olsen, Alexander Wegert, along with Daniel Blomqvist, the top 5 in the standings. Their separation 146 points. The top 10 all within 218 points entering today's action. Meanwhile, when it comes to the legends, David Baker, when it comes to the pro splits, has been the only full-time competitor with 8 starts and a top 5. That's given him a 414-point lead over Mark Redford, who has been picking up his starts as of late for Grizzly TFR Le Mans. Then Mario Schroer is currently 3rd. Then you have Armando Galina, who has made a start along with Thomas Geisler this season. It's a different story for Legend Sport, however, because Bright Esports driver Kanchot is currently in that lead by 39 points over Jan Brony. Miguel Hagstrom, a longtime veteran for this series, in 3rd. Claude Beval and Stefan Wang round out the top 5 in Legend Sport. They're separated in turn by 500 points or so amongst your top 10 of those drivers the top 3 all have made all the starts, but Claude Belval is within range despite having 2 less starts, along with Stefan Wang to the rest of that top 5 grouping. And let's take a look in turn at the team standings, because you see how the team dynamics have been in the different standings, Christian. Let's take a look at the team standings as a whole.
Yeah, it's Satellite Racing in the pro team standings. They've actually built a pretty significant lead at this point of the season, obviously in around 9 now. They've got 433 points back to Grizzly TFR Le Mans. They've moved into second spot. Apex Tech Racing Pro, the team that we kind of had sort of pointed out as being maybe the biggest challenges for the championship, are actually slipped back to third, but they're 583 points off. Then back and forth, just over 600 points behind Grizzly TFR Daytona, with Team Mad a significant way back now in 5th spot, 2,759 points away. So I would say pro team is down to the top 3 at this point. And then into sports teams, it's actually a really close battle for the top spot. NRG Racing ES, 4,675 points to the leaders, but only 125 points back to Bright Esports in second. And then another huge gulf back to the 3rd spot here, almost 900 points. HW Racing, 1,000 points off the lead there, with Hanson Brothers Racing, 1,689 back, and Black Tree Race Crew in 5th spot, 1,741 points off the lead.
That's all talked about, Matt, today's running order when it comes to the standings coming into today. Let's take a look at the race details, Jake. You mentioned incident points going to be extremely critical here today. As well, keep in mind, you see that 25 that did get bumped up after some appeals from some of the drivers to 35 today.
Yeah, it certainly did. But what is very crucial is that it's a drive-through penalty at 15 incident points. So you get one of those. And then it's another drive-through penalty for every 10 incident points you accrue on top of that. What does that mean? It means drivers effectively have 4 strikes and you're out today, and not 3 strikes and you're out. You get 15, that's your first strike. Actually, no, I'll correct myself. That is 3 strikes, you're out. 15 is your first, 25 is your second, and at 35, 3 strikes, you're out. That's the race. But it's 71 laps. It's a full Formula One race distance, which roughly adds up to 300 kilometers. It should be done in around an hour and 20 minutes, an hour and a half. But normally they have themselves a limit over these races of 2 hours to get a race done for things like rain and safety cars and all of that like. But they are running the brand new Mercedes AMG W12E Performance. iRacing's brand new partnership, of course, with the Mercedes Petronas Formula One team is absolutely fantastic. And when this car came in, replacing the very old McLaren MP430 that had just had a rework, this was a completely new feel. New drivers found themselves a way to get up to the top. And this is a really, really interestingly difficult car. Not necessarily one which everyone looks at the surface and goes, this is the car that I think is going to be the easiest thing in the world. They do have the one spare car. That will be very, very crucial to keep in mind today, because these machines are very difficult to run against. And they run on iRacing's new damage model, Justin. So they can very easily find themselves with a broken suspension. And it doesn't take much to break these cars. Break the front wing, break the rear wing, break the tires and have them go off on the tethers. It is a really, really tough car to drive. And this is a tough place to go and drive them in the element of top speed and not needing much downforce. This is a car which I'd say for a series like this, if you are jumping in for the first time, put some downforce on the car, even if you're going to be slower.
This should be a wild race in turn, because a lot of drivers, it seems, have been trying the different compounds, the different types of settling the paces. So far, the pace about 2 seconds the difference on the practice board for reference. Oh, that's wow, with the track temperature being more than 110 degrees Fahrenheit currently. The air temp above 80 degrees Fahrenheit today, so pretty toasty for these drivers. 46 degrees Celsius track temperature, 27 degrees the air temp here today. Look at the wind though, Christian. That's already kept up to about 15 kilometers an hour, 10 miles per hour to the southeast.
Yeah, and that's going to make a difference, because at this track there is quite a few DRS zones. You've got one all the way down the front stretch, then down the next straightaway, and then again down on the run towards turn 4. So the wind direction kind of either increases or decreases the power of that, depending on well, obviously which straightaway it's kind of giving you a headwind down, and obviously the speed of it as well. But those DRS zones are going to be pretty critical to being able to pull off a pass, and especially with this kind of era of Formula One car, if you didn't have that, it'd be very, very difficult to pull off a pass indeed.
And as well, it's going to be intriguing to see which drivers are able to try and break away from a DRS train that may build up throughout the race today. And right now at the top of the board, give credit to the 999. It's Miguel Freitas who has picked up the tempo for today and is leading this entire grouping when it comes to that pace so far by about 4/100ths and 5/100ths of a second over Dallas Pataska. Sean Campbell, Joshua Wolf, Ryan Walker, the current top 5 of the board.
And it does show that there are different drivers who find their way up to the top. Miguel Freitas, I think, might have just found a car-track combination that he gels with, and that's the reason why he's up there near the front in terms of times here in practice. Now, practice means one thing. The race is going to be certainly different. Drivers will be practicing different tyre compounds out there. There are 3 to choose from. The red-walled soft, as we focus right now on Joshua Wolf moving through towards turn 3, and Ramus, that small kink left, is turn 2. He's on the yellow-walled medium compound tyre, so he's got that to work with. And then there is, of course, the white-walled hard compound tyre. I expect most drivers to be going soft and medium. There is the white-walled hard compound tyre, taking a trip across the kitty litter, moving across, but they will have to be mindful here today. That DRS, the drag reduction system, it's a small flap in the rear wing. It opens up, it gives you a boost of about 80 brake horsepower as you go along the straight. It should give you a better chance to pull up alongside and make a move. It is not a guarantee to an overtake, but it's a really good inventive tool that was created in the late 2000s, early 2010s to improve overtaking. So they've got that to work with. They've got the DRS, which is crucial. They've got the different tyre compounds. I'd expect a 2-stop or a 3-stop race, but if you're incredibly brave, medium hard, 1 stop, I think if you're in the middle of the pack, you've got an option to make that work today, Justin.
Final practice coming to a close. Let's take the chance to remind you of today's charities supported by the Major Series as practice comes to a close. Tunnel to Towers Foundation. Or for the tragedy of 9/11, the Tunnel to Towers Foundation carries out its mission to do good by providing mortgage-free homes to Gold Star and fallen first responder families with young children, and by building custom-designed smart homes for catastrophe-injured veterans for first responders. For more info or to donate, go to t2t.org. Let's quickly go through your running order. 16 drivers on the starting grid for today. Dallas Pataska ready to lead them off to the green flag for the standing start. Ross Banfield, Sean Campbell, Ryan Wachowski, the top 4 today, with Thomas Cope and Joshua Wolf 5th and 6th. On Erwich and Brock round out the top 8. Brock did not set times in practice. Bobrovsky and Conway, your top 10.
And then pushing over into 11th position will be David H. Baker. Miguel Freitas, who was the fastest in practice, will have to go from 12th here today on the grid, with Ryan Walker and Cordell Cologne on row 7. The final row will be Travis Henderson and Tom Dreiling. And I've just had a look at everyone on the grid. They're either all on mediums here or hards, Justin.
Keep an eye on the strategy today as the drivers are all set to go. Green lights are out. We're underway for the Austrian Grand Prix. And what a launch from Thomas Cope. Cope is going for the lead already, nearly getting it 3 wide. Pataska holds on. 1 crash in the heart of Nicky Lauda as the rest of the field rumbles their way forward.
Oh, that was just Joshua Wolf. That was all on his own, just finding out what cold tyres are like off of the start. He just hit the brakes and it just speared right in. They go into Ramus then for the first time, and look like as they go through, it's pretty nice and calm. What a start from Thomas Cope. He certainly worked out what you need to do off of these starts. You've got to make sure that you're managing not only your start on the power, but also using the attack mode deployment boost of the energy recovery systems of this car. You got a really good start side by side as they run into route corner for the first time, and Davin Melnarovic and Sean Campbell having a scrap for 4th.
The opening lap already bringing plenty of craziness. Wolf, the first driver, already with the toe as mentioned. But so far, it's Pataska, Banfield, Cope, your top 3 to end off the first lap through turn 10. Drivers already kicking up plenty of dirt on these corner exits here, especially in that 4-front back train led by Sean Campbell.
Yeah, Sean Campbell's looking slow, actually. He didn't make the greatest of getaways, but he's already building up a train behind him. He actually got through turn 1 relatively well there. Has pulled a bit of a gap on Melnaritz, but Melnaritz was running him down on the front stretch.
Melnaritz really backing it down to send from behind. Jamie Conway driving the orange and blue machine, rubbing medium wall to medium wall. rather hard wall. It's a medium wall for Bobrovsky's car, which is on the left side of the racetrack. And that'll be a talking point today. The tire strategies. Drivers discussing, do they go one stopper or two? Everyone's starting off on the mediums or hard compounded tires today.
Well, one stop or two certainly seems to be a question to be asked. The track temperature is 45 degrees out there in terms of C, over 110 in Fahrenheit. So it is a very hot temperature today. I believe that they will be looking more to two-stopping than one-stopping. Those on the hards, I think, have more leeway to go out there and be aggressive, maybe put a soft compound tire on towards the end. Pataska, though, this is crucial in terms of what he wants to do. He's looking for his third straight victory here in the Major Series, get himself back into position with Sean Campbell. Remember, Sean Campbell at the World 600 Charlotte Motor Speedway fell back very late on, dropped outside of the top 5. The fact he's in 4th position right now, this might be another case for him of damage limitation.
Absolutely huge for Pataska. Just that one race helped him close up about 50, 60 points in the championship. Speaking of close up, Thomas Cope, with his best run since Daytona earlier this year, dives to second.
Yeah, really nice pass there. It's so easy to just lock up and slide straight on, but he didn't do that. He got it done, and he didn't really lose too much time. He's just on the DRS window of Pataska.
Just about 1.3 seconds back. Remember, need to be around that 1 second or so mark to be able to initialize that detection zone when it comes to the DRS here today. Sean Campbell has lost DRS range just about to the back end of Cope and Banfield. Meanwhile, behind them, slow down Monerwich having to let by a couple spots.
And that can easily happen just by being a little bit too aggressive, and you get them here for running wide through sections of track. It's not often that they do this in iRacing to get a slowdown penalty for going wide, but you do in this sort of series. I do also want to try and see if we can go on board with the driver at this point in time, because there's a big lunge to the inside just back there. It looks like that was Miguel Freitas and Dawson Brock having a good race. That was Dawson Brock going through. But I do want to try and showcase something. You can see the 4 green lights on the dash indicates that the DRS is available with 2 green lights on the dash. It means that you've got the ability to use the DRS, but you don't have it open right now. And when you get 1 light on the dashboard there in green, it tells you that you have hit yourself within 1 second of the car in front. You have hit the detection point, and you have the DRS, the drag reduction system, available for you at the next available line.
That's going to be very critical to make sure you keep aware of all that here. You see there's the detection light, for example, right there on board here. You can see just be able to activate for the front straightaway, but this is the fear that you have, though. A DRS train. Technically, that's starting to form up with Conway in the middle of this train, for example. Not so much at the back of it, where Dawson Brock wants to zip his way around the right side of Wasilewski. Wasilewski, a -5 to start the race.
Yeah, and he's out there on those hard tires.
Oh.
This was something I was a little bit worried about with the runners that we're going to start the race on hards. Is that I mean, we've seen it in real life. Is that it's just not a good tire for the beginning of the race. You're always under threat. Everyone's really closely packed. It's basically the worst time to be running the slowest tire. So he's going to have to hope that basically everybody ahead of him who's on the mediums pits earlier and comes out in traffic to make this strategy work. That said, when you get to about 20 to 25 laps into the race...
Oh, Brock's gone.
Dawson Brock has spun it off the racetrack through turn 8. Brock picking up plenty of sand on the edge of his tires, tries to get it back fired up, but Dawson Brock to second and last running on track as Wolf has just exited the pit lane.
This track only has 2 left-hand corners. That was the second one of them. They follow in sequence, and Dawson Brock, fortunate there wasn't any contact. He did have some contact a little bit before that, though, as Wasilewski almost ran up the back of him after making that move. Brock, of course, the winner of the Indianapolis 500 round, did so on a brilliant race overall, making 1 less stop compared to some of his rivals. But today, a little bit more difficult here, and the troubles pretty much showing themselves early, as those left-hand corners will also keep an eye out on, because it will be a case of left-hand tyre wear, which will be more important than right-hand side tyre wear with how this track navigates around this beautiful track just below the Styrian Mountains.
And as these drivers look to settle it out for the time being, let's take a chance to look at how the start played out, if we can, at your GSRC replay machine. Next moment or so. Let's see how the start played out. Thomas Cope, a great start, but not so much if you're in the middle of the pack.
Look, this is how easily it can go wrong. On the brakes, and you can see there, and Christian, you've got a better idea of that, how easy it is to snap the car right. That might be a case of just using too much brake to start with, or maybe a case of the brake balance not being in the right position.
Yeah, that was really surprising to see just how aggressively it went around him. And it did totally look like he had the brake bias too far rearwards. But, you know, this track really does promote you running the bias pretty much as far back as you can, just because it's so easy to lock an inside front into any of the, you know, the hard stops. So not too surprised to see someone struggling with that, but very surprised off the line. You see Dawson Brock coming through there. That S section of the track is probably the most on-limit, I would say, area late in the run. So I expect we'll see a couple more drivers struggling through there as well.
By the way, Banfield and Cope have swapped spots for reference. Brock has gained back a spot on Walker. And this is to be expected amongst these two as they continue to swap back and forth for this DRS. The interesting thing amongst this, Jake, they're both on the hard compounded tires, now 3 seconds back nearly of Dallas Pataska.
Dallas Pataska in the number 23 is on the mediums, so that is going to be a case of that medium tire should be good for around about 20 to 30 laps, should be how good that car feels. The question is whether you want to be looking at that as a case of, okay, are we going medium hard today or medium soft? So the question is, will a medium tire and a soft tire with a pit stop in the middle be quicker than just staying on the hard compound tire and staying out on track? At this moment in time, I think it's really encouraging for the hard compound tire runners. They're 8 laps in, they're about a quarter of the way through the medium tire stint. And I would say at this point in time, if they're only 3 seconds back, I think they're in a really good position today. Lane transit should be somewhere around 20 seconds, there or thereabouts. It's about a 3 to 4 second pit stop that they'll be having to deal with here today. And if they're losing only 3 seconds at this pace, they're only going to be 12 seconds back when it comes to a one stop. I would put them 8 seconds ahead of where they want to be at this point in time.
A lot to consider, especially knowing how tricky this car can be. How many sparks are getting kicked up in the edge of the DRS zones too. Those beautiful effects coming in when it comes to this race car. DRS activated for Thomas Cope. No DRS for Ross Banfield. A major boost of about 10 miles an hour. Not close enough this time as Cope for the swap.
And it's a fair point on the hard tires, because I was obviously just saying that the hard is not normally a good tire to start the race on, but one of the best starters was actually Thomas Cope. So nicely proving me wrong on that one. And yeah, I would agree with Jake that if they're only 3 seconds behind at this point, that it's looking really quite good for them. The driver it's not looking good for. He is running in 4th, but you know it's not looking great strategy-wise for him. Is Sean Campbell? He's out there on the mediums. He's not really troubling these guys on the hards, and it's only going to start to move further away from him. I would expect that Pataska really should have been able to pull out more on these mediums at the beginning of the race here. So it'll be interesting to see when they switch over. And right as Dawson Brock was having his kind of spin was when I was just bringing up the point that the crossover is about 20 to 25 laps into the run, where the hard is basically the better tire after that point. So what I'm going to be looking for is how long Pataska and Campbell can run this medium for. And if when we get to about 20 to 25 in, that it really starts to reverse around and we see that gap to Pataska really close up. And then it's a matter of how and when do you choose to pit and avoiding dealing with too much traffic. You know, you don't really ever want to be the first guy to pit just because of the traffic.
Already on lap 10, by the way, coming up to lap 11. In the part I'm keeping my eye on is the storyline you mentioned in particular, especially say if you're in the heart of some of these packs. The interesting thing is, Jake, incident points are flying. The estimates for some already 10, 11 points nearly. But that is going to be intriguing. Remember, this is one of the tracks with some of the rule exceptions. For a couple areas, you can go off a little bit more where it's 4 tires off. Specifically, Niki Lauda turn, the run through turn 2, the run through turn 5, turn 7, turn 8, turn 9/10. You can all go off the circuit 4 tires before the incident points come in.
And for people who sort of think that this is a really difficult circuit for incident points and it's unfair in comparison to some of the other circuits on the iRacing service, let's just remember in real life that there were 43 separate incident checks and track limit violations in the Formula One race of 20 vehicles. So it tells you all you need to know. This is the sort of track where drivers will want to try and get as much of an inch as possible around here. They'll try and take a mile if they can, but this is also the sort of track where you do have to be within the bounds and you are driving at such high speeds, and it does take pinpoint accuracy to hit those points. So we focus on that battle with Trevor Pavlovsky in 5th position, Jamie Conway in 6th, Ryan Wasilewski in 7th place. This is the sort of track where it is so easy to accrue those incidents and pick them up. And yes, some drivers are going to fall foul particularly early. I think it might also be a race today of who gets the fewest amount of drive-through penalties. One thing to keep in mind when they do get a drive-through penalty here today, Justin, they have 4 laps to serve it before they get disqualified.
So had to keep that in mind. There is a slowdown worth noting on track for Tom Dreiling, who is running 15th in regards to instant points. And this is a good segue to talk about him today because it is start 100 in the Major Series for car 11. He is the driver of the day, nominated by the Major Series for the European Pro Split. A longtime member of the Major Series, Christian.
Yeah, obviously we're seeing Tom Dreiling has perhaps not had the best of seasons so far, but he has accrued the most number of starts, and he's having a solid run here today.
Oh, he's got a car!
About to pick up a position here as he ducks to the inside of Henderson.
Oh my gosh! Travis Henderson had gone off the track on his own and nearly came and backed it up into Tom.
Well, the issue there was that Travis Henderson slightly missed the apex there going into Slushgold, locked up the fronts and effectively found himself in the gravel. That made the turnaround. Great battling those. All of a sudden, Ross Banfield's lost the position at Ramus then. Straight down the inside goes Thomas Cope into turn 3. Over to Slushgold they go again. It'll have to be the long way around then from Banfield if he wants his position to be taken away. But Thomas Cope having none of it, and they hold themselves back in station. So ultimately, Slushgold is a really tough corner. It drops down the hill, and then you continue to turn off at the exit. Makes it very difficult to put the power down. And one thing that these Mercedes W12E performances have is a boatload of torque, and that makes it so difficult to put the power down with confidence.
And confidence is where a lot of the speed comes in. Oh my goodness! Saves it! How in the world?
That car was gone 5 times, Christian.
Yeah, 100%. I was just basically waiting for him to spin into the pit wall there. Oh, and Sean Campbell does!
Oh my goodness, Sean Campbell, the points leader, has been car 26. And
Bobrovsky's just gone off as well behind him.
Absolute chaos through Niki Lauda has brought out the championship leader off the circuit.
We're talking about how these tyres are going to handle lap 13. If you've been too aggressive early on, then there's trouble. Sean Campbell finding out what makes turn number 1 so difficult, because off of the exit, you have that big anti-cut curb on the outside, a sausage curb that runs all the way through. He effectively got that rear left tyre hooked up on that curb, trying to put the power down, and it's just spurred him over to the left-hand side. Nothing you can do. Bobrovsky did exactly the same thing, but the car broke the other way, and you can see here he's going to be up over that anti-cut curve, and bang! It's just going to go. There's no way you can stop that.
Front wing, rear wing gone. The tires wanting to dance away. Bobrovsky brings the blue cone with him as he slams the rear wing into the wall. And all of this as well, just moments before Cope had that amazing save. But absolute calamity in the span of 10 seconds. The championship just took a massive swing to Bataska's way.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, we're just not accustomed to seeing Sean Campbell make mistakes like that, but it is very, very easy to do in this car. And we see a pass there into turn 3. Is that Wasilewski and Melnitz?
Yeah.
Melnitz getting by Wasilewski?
I was about to say, as Wasilewski has charged back up to 6th here, the hard tires are starting to come back towards the way of the mediums in some of the cases here of notice, Christian. Some of the tire wear starting to come up a little bit towards the hards way within the same ballpark.
Yeah, well, that's where I was kind of a little bit surprised to see Banfield and Cope fighting as much as they were, but it now looks like Cope's dropped significantly behind Banfield, so we'll have to see if he can close up to Pataska. But where I was going with that is they were slowing each other down and allowing Pataska to build a bigger gap, you know, before that crossover point came about. But it is about, you know, 10 plus laps into a run where any kind of handling imbalance that you've got going is going to show up, and it kind of showed up for about 3 or 4 drivers all in the space of 1 lap right there. And something we missed was Jamie Conway made a pretty brave pass actually on the outside of Melnitz. He had a really nice run into 4. He didn't quite get it done in 4. Had to go around the outside into 5.
That was the previous lap or so, I believe you're referring to in that regard a couple moments ago. Miguel Freitas, meanwhile, we mentioned him very quick in practice, didn't have the qualifying tempo, but the 99 also on the hard compounded tires is coming to the pack. One of the better drivers in terms of the pace seen. He put in 38 laps of practice in final practice. His average pace in the 109s. Needing to pick up the tempo, though, to get up to Dawson Brock.
Yeah, it's a comfortable pass then done on this lap on Cordell Cologne. Puts him up into 8th position. It's a couple seconds up, though, to Dawson Brock. So there'll be some work for Miguel Freitas to do. No doubt about it at this point in time. Brock last time by a 7.7. It was an 8.4 for Miguel Freitas with the pass. So still dropped about 0.7 of a second over the course of this lap. But I am interested on the medium tyres degradation so far. Dallas Pataska set his slowest lap of the race so far on this lap, which is a 107.8 as Cologne gets very close, heading up into Ramus. And why'd you go? Abandon ship for Miguel Freitas. He goes overboard, loses 2 places for his troubles, and will drop back. That's how easily he can get it wrong at Ramus. Didn't want any fight with that anti-cut curve on the outside. But I was going to talk about Pataska. He's 0.8 of a second slower than his fastest lap of the race so far. So it does show you that the medium tyre is starting to drop a little bit.
10 picked up, in fact, indeed. Banfield this time, he puts in a 6, 107.6. Banfield loses the time he picked up. Cope has really slipped back, though. You see the difference back and forth in terms of some of the times for your top 2. Something is up with Cope, though, I will say, after the major save, because he's in the 108s now. Cope has really slowed it down.
Yeah, I got to think that that's just down to the balance, you know. Obviously, the big moment's going to have scared him. That's going to take a lot of confidence away from you. And he's running in a fairly safe 3rd spot right now. But he did look like he potentially had pace to challenge for the win. So a little bit disappointing for him. There's not, unfortunately, a whole lot he can do in his pit stop. And obviously being on the hard, so it's going to be a long way out anyway. If he has any front wing adjustment left, he could take a little bit of wing out. That might help him if he is struggling with oversteer, which is what I'm expecting he is struggling with, because that was kind of my own my own issues really in practice last night. Was to get the balance I wanted in the early laps, I was then just way too loose after about 10, so pretty much just have to accept that the car is going to be a little bit understeer biased at the beginning of a run.
What else can you adjust in the pit lane in the span of those couple seconds for reference sake? Go ahead.
Huge snap off the corner there by Melnitz. He's made himself vulnerable to Wasilewski. He's going to have to go to the outside, but he does have the DRS.
Wasilewski zipping on by, but you mentioned the wing adjustments you can make. Is there anything else you can adjust? Since, remember, with this car, you cannot refuel in the pit lane.
Yeah, if you're absolutely desperate to, you know, enact a balance change, I strongly suspect that nobody is running with the front wing adjustment maxed out, you know. So, he's got to spin on the front stretch here.
Oh, that's 13th. That's Tom Dreiling. Travis Henderson gets the spot back.
Yeah,
able to tow it just in time before the race leaders come up.
Yeah,
rear left was the issue there. He went through and he tapped the wall inside and outside, and it was the rear left tyre that effectively detached away, which was the issue, and that's why the car has to take a tow. And it's so easy to do. I'm always reminded with that sort of instant, Justin, of Timo Glock's accident back in 2010, I want to say, going through the final corner at Hockenheim. And yeah, he just gets out there on the curb. There's a bit of dust and dirt out there, and it's just so easy to loop it around because the car compresses through that final corner, and you have to be so committed to have that aerodynamic balance of the car pretty much spot on.
Speaking of retirements in this race, Sean Campbell is officially out of the race, dead last, 16th. Dallas Pataska may be right back into this championship fight because of that. Tom Dryling has come out of the pit lane. Of note, Dallas Pataska has reached lap traffic for the first time nearly, all while Wasilewski has made things intriguing. Satellite Racing definitely has the pace, Christian, today. And believe you're racing leader today in this type of car. How does this make you feel?
I honestly don't know. If I'm being completely honest about it, I felt like the pace that I'd seen in qualifying made me think that Europe was probably the stronger region this week versus Americas, because I ran a 103.8, which was good enough for pole in Americas, but it would have put me something like 4th or 5th here in Euro, and I totally don't have the pace to do a 103.3 like Pataska did for the pole. So I was really curious as to what these guys were going to do, both in terms of strategy and also the big unknown for me is how much fuel I can get away with kind of taking out of the car, because if you base the mileage off of the beginning of the race where you know, the car's naturally heavier, then you're going to overshoot. But last year when we ran at Monza, I made the mistake of going too far the other way, and having to try and save even a kilo of fuel was an absolute nightmare. So I don't want to do that. And I'm probably going to ask Pataska how much he has left at the end of this race and kind of feel around that. But the thing I'm still focused on is the strategy as to what everyone's going to do, because this is not a nailed-on win for Pataska by any means. He's still definitely under threat from Banfield and Cope, even if he does have, you know, almost a 5-second advantage at this point. But if he was to pit now, he's going to come out in about, you know, sixth spot. He's going to be behind Melneritz, Wasilewski, Conway. They're spread apart a little bit, but they're still packed close enough that it would be difficult for him to get through. So I think he's got to try and extend this run out up to the point where he can at least come out in about 4th spot and then really force the issue with Banfield and Cope.
I'd like to point out as well in this scenario, Justin, just before we are reaching towards that opening pit stop phase, Ross Banfield's fastest lap is a 107.6. I've been looking at his lap times, and his last lap since about lap 14, so I'd say his last 7, and I'll be interested to see this 8th lap as he crosses over the line, have all been within 0.2 of each other as they've gone through. It's another 107.7. Ross Banfield's got incredible consistency on the hard tire right now.
Was about to say, just looking at that mark too, the only other time that he wasn't in that ballpark was when he was battling with Thomas Cope last time on lap 13 before the major save. So that consistency absolutely there indeed. But you mentioned a great point, Christian. Fuel saving also will be a talking point throughout the race today, because the lighter the car, the quicker you go. In some circumstances, in certain other platforms, you may see drivers try and take out fuel, try and go a little bit lighter, try and say, we'll save the gas during the run. But other times, when you're in full distance, that's not really an option. You'll have to save fuel at some time.
Yeah, I think here, with it being a relatively short race, you see a car going around there. I'm not sure who that was. It looks like it's Trevor Bobrovsky.
Believe indeed it was in that case. That loses spots to 12th position. Right behind Ryan Walker and David Baker in turn. That drops him 13th on the pylon. 12th still on the pylon, should say. But you were saying?
Yeah, so with it being a relatively short-ish lap, all the race distances are about the same when it comes to Formula One. They're about 305 kilometers, but around here, I don't think that you were you know, at the capacity of the car. The capacity is around about 110 kilos. And I was sort of shooting around about 100 kilos to be able to do the race distance. So I don't think you're forced into saving fuel. I was going to say that would have been a brave pass there into turn 1. It's not normally where we see that done. But it's a question as to whether you can go as low as, say, 95 kilos or whether you need closer to 100. And it's worth having.
Ryan Walker under attack for 10th. David Baker zips on by. And part of the reason that's so easy there, not just the DRS, Walker's driving with significant left front wing damage, Jake.
Yeah, definitely is. So there's a little bit of curling up for Ryan Walker to go and deal with right now. So you've got to be very alert, and you've got all these different end plates on the front, which effectively allow the aerodynamic balance. Of course, the 2022 spec Formula One cars have taken a lot of that spec off and have replaced that with ground effect. But in 2021, which is where this machine comes from, you've got 4 different rivulets, basically, that pushes the car down, pushes the air up over the tire and all the way back through the various side pods and through the back and out through the exhaust with the diffuser. And with all of that to sort of deal with a lot of that dirty air, yes, these cars are able to make moves. You are able to make overtakes because you do have 3 DRS zones, but you really do need those DRS zones. If you're following naturally through the middle sector, it's quite significant to see that a couple of tenths of a second can very quickly fall away just by blinking, it seems.
And for reference, I believe the wing change can take about, correct me if I'm wrong, Christian, 5 to 7 seconds on the iRacing sim with this car?
That seems a little bit long. It should be able to be done within, you know, the kind of time of a normal tire change. But to come back to that point, in terms of what can you do in a pit stop, I think it's pretty much only front wing adjustment. But if you are absolutely desperate, like if you are out of range on the wing adjustment, you could go as far as adding a little bit of front air pressure, but you really don't want to do that unless you're absolutely desperate for some balance.
Jamie Conway is very lucky he's still got a car.
Very lucky indeed. David Baker coming in, but why is Jamie Conway lucky? He is in 4th still. He did have a similar save, I think you've seen, Jake, that nearly spun him around a couple times to Niki Lauda compared to Cope.
Yeah, he lost the car on the exit. In fact, car losing it on the exit is Tom Dreiling. So Dreiling really struggling out there on track, and he's going to have to wait for everybody to get by before he can put himself back forward again. He's got to be careful.
Not by.
He just about gets back going again, and as Wolf and Brock both jump to the inside. But the issue is with turn 1 is that Conway lost it on in the middle of the corner, trying to get the power down, and he had to fight not once but twice to get the car pointed back in a straight line. So it really is struggle street, and Tom Dreiling becomes the first driver to hit the instant point limit.
Few spins get you to that mark indeed. You mentioned Conway. Still holding on to 4th though, just hit a little of the anti-cut curves a little bit as well there. So incident points a factor, pit stops coming up to be a factor. Baker, for reference, took the softs last time out.
So he's committed to a 2-stopper then, because there's no way he can run a soft to the end of the race at this point.
Yeah.
I imagine he's going to run a soft through the middle, and then if he can make it last long enough, he might as well do soft again at the end. But I think we'll probably see him put the mediums on.
For reference, the sim data for the tire shows the soft, the car itself showing the mediums for the confusion there. So the data is showing softs on that mark. Can hear Christian writing down the note there. Either way, that opens up the 2-stop window you mentioned potentially for a possibility for those in the heart of the pack, as things have settled out a bit for the time being right before the pit stop.
So this pit stop phase is important. Lap 28, and it's a question of do you want to go 1 stop or 2 stop here. Pataska is going to be the interesting driver in terms of how far you can make it run. Of course, there isn't a scenario in this race where they can run a medium tire then a second medium tire. They have to change the compound that they have available to them today. You have to use a combination of a soft and a medium, or a soft and a hard, or a medium and a hard. over the course of this race. So it adds a little bit more into the racing. It was something that was added when Pirelli got themselves into Formula One, breaking away the tyre war, of course, of Michelin versus Bridgestone, which I thought was really interesting. But it was also, I believe, in the back end of that era where they started having prime and option tyres. They had a prime and an option, and then they moved the tyre compounds to have 3 different types of compounds. Then you had the entire rainbow wheel of tyres where every tyre had a different color to it depending on what compound, C5, C4, C3, in terms of the hardness of the tyre. But now every tyre is very identifiable: a soft color, a medium color, and a hard color.
Yeah, I think that's the best way, if I'm honest. I was not really a fan of the days of the hyper soft, the ultra soft, and the super soft.
Yeah, remember those coming in a couple times back in the day when they were utilized after they were brought in the mid-2010s? The only time I remember really seeing them utilized too much was at Monaco, and even then those tires burned through pretty quickly, if I remember right.
Yeah, that was pretty much the goal of those. Is and you know, they still have that, even though you only visually see 3 compounds of the soft, medium, and hard on a race weekend. Right. There is still actually 5 compounds, but it's still less than what they had. But back when they really did have, like, you know, 7 or 8 different options available.
Good to note, especially since it depends on the track if the notes pursue right there, where sometimes you might have the tires shift towards that super and hyper soft territory depending on the circuit. Others go for the more harder compound depending on the tire degradation. By the way, new fastest lap you seen moments ago, David Baker on the softs. He only did it by a couple 100ths though compared to Dallas Pataska, just showing a bit of the raw pace of the 23 today.
Yeah, that pace certainly looks very good from David H. Baker on the soft tyre, but expect that to fall away rapidly over the course of this stint. On top of that, David H. Baker does have clean track available to him. It's about 18 seconds up to Trivavrovsky's group, which is fighting right now for 9th place. So there is still a lot of time to go and grab that time back. But I am still very curious about this race because Dallas Pataska has suddenly turned up the wick a little bit. He's also doing 7 flats at this point, Ross Banfield, as well as there's side-by-side action moving through up into Ramus corner, turn number 2. Vavrovsky making the pass then on Ryan Walker, moving up then into 10th position with that pass. But what I think's interesting is for every lap that is completed here over the course of this race, effectively you're burning off 1/10 of a second's worth of fuel in the car. Your car can go 1/10 of a second quicker. Now naturally that gets offset by the tyre degrading out there, so that's why you see, especially just coming out of a stint, why cars can go a lot quicker, why these Mercedes W12E performances go a lot faster here at the Red Bull Ring when they have a brand new set of tyres on.
Indeed. As big spin, this is from Cope. Thomas Cope, who had been dropping back and started to pick it up, has dropped it. He drops back to 4th into a battle now for the spot with Wasilewski.
And again, Christian, it's the anti-cut curb on the outside, which he's just clipped.
Yeah, and I was thinking that he'd kind of gone pretty far down the straightaway before he actually lost the car there. I would have to see a replay to really see what happened. But you do have to be very careful of those anti-cuts. Obviously, we saw with Sean Campbell, it completely ended his day. Not so severe for Thomas Cope, but it's going to pull him out of that fight for the win. Yeah, you see there, it was already going around a little bit, and then he just tapped the left rear on the curb, and that just fully sent him around.
So Thomas Cope dropping back to 4th with this one little mistake you seen there with the left rear tire. And the 64 really loose as a result of that sequence. Mount Erwich, by the way, has come into pit lane from the top 6. So the window is open for some of your front runners now. Soft tires, 2 top stopper taken by the 69.
So Melnarovic then will be out and away again, just behind Miguel Freitas, just behind Trivavrovsky, actually, his teammate. So that will put Melnarovic back into 9th position with a bit of work to do out there on track. So it was worth keeping that in mind. But soft might be, I think, a little bit aggressive at this point in time. Lap 32 of 71. and traditionally that tire goes away after about 10 laps, and then you're basically at struggle street from that point onwards. So I'm not sure whether that's going to be the reality. Soft medium's probably the way that most teams are going to be looking to try and go with it. But I would say on top of that, in terms of trying to get into position, Pataska's right in that window. He's done well, 33 laps. He wants to one-stop this race. I think he's in a really good position to get himself forward. Ross Banfield's just calmly keeping himself at pace. But that spin from Thomas Cope has just promoted here, Justin, Jamie Conway up into third position. And this is going to be big for him because he's third in the championship right now, and he's probably the only driver out there besides the top two of Pataska and Campbell who can really, I would say, argue anything about what has been a crucial race, and that is a very slow Sean Campbell back out and away again. I believe he was looking to get some required damages fixed before getting back out and racing again.
He just came back after losing 14 laps. He was out of the paddock the whole entire time, and I have to wonder, is the thought of the championship maybe coming in there where there's a certain mark maybe he's trying to hit? Speaking of drivers hitting certain marks, Pataska's in the pit lane.
Yeah, so he's done nearly half the race now, and he actually a little bit slow into the box there. Presume he's now going to switch to the hards.
Off and away, Pataska is on the hard.
So this will be a one-stop strategy then for Dallas Pataska, and he'll be racing with Ross Banfield, trying to get that all sorted. The good news is on the early stint on that run, he should be able to use the use the hard tire, to get himself up to speed and get himself going. Now the key's going to be who's going to do well. Malnarovic, by the way, on that soft tire has just gone and set the fastest lap of the race then with a 106.7. So he is looking to really try and use that tire up now to get that benefit later on in the race. But Thomas Cope right now in third position on the road at this point in time. He's got his eyes set on Jamie Conway here and second position, but this might be the time where the tyres do just start trying to let go, and that wear does become oh so important.
Absolutely with Cope. He's spun around nearly twice, saved it majorly once, looped it around once. He's now 11 seconds back after being 5 seconds back before the bobbles started to begin. Remember, he was bunched up with Banfield before this. Wasilewski, keep in mind, is right now the picture of being able to recover from a poor launch in the race. Outside, trying to make it work this time. Through turn 3, second DRS zone coming up here.
Yeah, it's still going to be difficult for him, but he helped himself there by checking up Cope. He's going to be forced to go the long way around. He is going to get it done, but Cope tries to come back on the inside, isn't able to get alongside.
Able to clear by pretty easily. Next car up, Jamie Conway, about 2 seconds up the pack. But what a charge by Wasilewski to be able to come back from the edge of the top 10, mind you. He had that poor launch on these hard compound tires. He's looked like a completely different driver since the pace has settled out for him.
And again, I think it is a case that you do have to practice your starts in this car. There is going to be a case of bogging down if you don't have the right RPM off of the start. It's very easy to hit the anti-stall and those of that effect. So there is always that issue to deal with, but Wasilewski's done well. And Dallas Pataska on the hards has gone and put a 106.6 down. That is a big statement message in comparison to Ross Banfield, who was 0.8 of a second slower. I think Ross Banfield's trying to stretch out that hard compound tire as long as possible to move into a position where it's not going to be a case of he's only gaining a 10th here and a 10th there over the course of his next stint, that he can gain upwards of half a second a lap, a second a lap, depending on the tires. Ross Banfield right now, this is the most critical phase of his race.
Hearing that the situation with Campbell, and want to turn to you, Christian, on this, wondering here is, in that regard, he said that in regards to his situation, he was trying to turn right, of course, the time of the incident that we've seen. He had practiced that same line, had struggled before. Part of the issue, though, he was out of that time for that period. He had a technical issue with the computer before coming back on the racetrack. So that explains a little bit of the situation with Campbell. But remember, shot left coming through the right-hander, Nicky Lauda.
Yeah, so kind of a bad day got worse for him, I suppose, in that sense. He might still pick up a couple of positions towards the end of the race if we see anyone else with any severe problems, but I suspect he's just trying to get to the halfway point so that he's going to score points for this event.
Oh, I've just seen as well, Travis Henderson is down in the pits right now because he's got a drive-through penalty.
So in our black flag second one of the race, remember Henderson has had a spin at least once. He also has significant front wing damage to the snout and nearly adds some more to it. And the front wing stays going after Rizonda the quick bobble around. Currently Henderson 13th on the racetrack, the only driver a lap down. Wolf is 2 laps down. Dowling is 3 laps down on the circuit. Ross Banfield, by the way, is still stretching it forward and is still maintaining a 10-second advantage over the rest of the pack. Pataska is 14 seconds behind him for reference.
Yeah, so with the pit stop, he should cycle out behind Pataska by about 5 seconds. But the thing that's interesting about the hard and the mediums is that pretty much the medium will run in a way where it's kind of, depending on track conditions, give or take equal to the fuel burn, so that the pace should stay about the same. The soft will obviously go the other way, where it'll start off really, really quick, but then just drop off a ton.
Oh, trouble, Dawson Brock!
The other way.
Dawson Brock, a hard hit to the catch fence. Oh, through turn 3, something broke on the 83 car, and something fierce.
Oh, that's the throttle pedal. The throttle pedal's just completely stuck down. As he's coming to brake, he's got himself down to about 180 and the car's just gone straight on and accelerated. That will be a huge, scary moment as a driver to have that. Thank goodness it's sim racing. But Dawson Brock, the throttle pedal has just decided, no, it didn't want to slow down anymore. You can see he's going to go down the gear, 7th, 6th, 5th, 4th, 4. It's just gone up.
I am not sure what to say. Dawson Brock was running a solid race before that trouble, started mid-pack, was making his strides through the field, and now his strides come to an end with a hard hit to the wall. Never hard hit as a result of incidents in a never long tow coming. Thomas Cope now trying to see how things fare out with Pataska here. Pataska, remember, on the fresher, hard compounded tires. Cope giving the space nice and easy.
Yeah, it's horrible for Cope, really, when you think that at one point we were talking about him contending for the race victory, and now he's already been passed by a car that's completed its pit stop, and he still has to pit. So I'm not going to say it's gone completely away from him, because he still is in the top 5, but I feel he'll be pretty disappointed that he's clearly out of contention to win now.
Yeah, this was in line for one of his best runs of the season since Daytona, right from the start, and then the drop back began in the battle. I wonder what's going on with the spotter stand as well with Charles Bushell, and add insult to injury, incident points built up, another spin meanwhile going on for Cordell Cologne. So you have one driver off and Thomas Cope having to serve a drive-through right now.
Worst thing about that drive-through is that he's not able to take service as he goes and takes it. Otherwise, it will not count as a drive-through penalty. Cordell Cologne having that big issue then at Schlossgold corner. That's just a case of overdoing it on the brakes, just going a little bit too deep in, caught out on the wrong side, and the track just falls away. And effectively, you're a passenger from that point onwards. But a shame for Thomas Cope. And I think that might be one of the reasons why he dropped back so dramatically in terms of his pace, because he was trying to keep it within the bounds of the instant limits.
We talked about how difficult this track could be. We're just past halfway, mind you, 31 laps to go already in this one. Banfield continuing to stretch it forward. Cope is coming in to serve the penalty right now. Now it's that slow crawl through the lane. The speed limit here, 50 miles per hour in the sim on iRacing. Now we'll drop him out of contention for a top 5. Speaking of battling, though, Ryan Walker, Cordell Cologne, quick swap. Walker has already completed his stop, mind you, about 9 laps ago. He is on the hards compared to Cordell Cologne, who has yet to pit.
And it looks like there's a battle for second right now. Wasilewski is on the back of Conway.
About to bring that up there with Pataska reeling them in too. Conway running the 107.5s the last time by, trying to play defense. The average pace for the leaders, 107.1s.
This has been a good run so far from Jamie Conway, and I tell you what, Wasilewski is doing the right things here. He's going to try and put pressure on Jamie Conway in the number 42 and do so in such a way that allows Dallas Pataska to close up. It's perfect in terms of teammate strategy. You don't want to be held up by a driver like Jamie Conway. I think Pataska would like to use Wasilewski potentially as a pick to get through, and when you've got two cars battling in front, it's very easy to coordinate when you've got a teammate there. DRS flat wide open, little search to the inside then at Ramus corner. Doesn't quite pay off for number 86 in Ryan Wasilewski. And it's hard compound versus hard compound with 30 laps to go as they continue their race here down into towards Schlossgold.
Their peak in turn as well, not able to make it work this time. Off towards turn 5 and 6 to end off sector 2. And I will give credit still again to Conway in the midst of all this. Part of that team we mentioned in Apex Tech that's seen a lot of shuffling, a lot of restructuring with them, along with Chris Barrett. Conway himself, someone that started off in the early days of gaming before charging his way to the ranks recently. Also, of course, raced in sports cars in 2021, and now Conway coming in. Pelony as well, Cordell Colon serving the drive-through at the other end of the lane.
Yeah, it's great news really for Pataska there, because depending on how long Conway and Wasilewski were going to battle for, it was going to draw Pataska in and potentially slow him down if Wasilewski could clear him. But now it's just a straight teammate versus teammate deal, and I don't imagine that Wasilewski will make this too difficult for Pataska.
Brock now out of the race, has parked it for the time being. See if there's a return back similar to what we've seen with Campbell before. But this is where teamwork comes into play, right? We see it in terms of real-world World Championship competition in Formula 1. Shouldn't be too hard for Pataska here, you'd have to think, with the different strategies being utilized by these two drivers.
I think this is a lot more interesting than I think we've given it credit for. So there could be a case of a multi where Ryan hasn't hit it, Dallas has. In comes Wasilewski, in comes Ross Banfield as well. So they could only go 43 laps on their stint, which leaves 28 laps to go. Should be medium tyres at this point for Ross Banfield. It is. So Pataska will take the race lead back once again on his set then of for the number 23, his set of hard compound tyres. It now becomes a game of chase here for Ross Banfield. How does he want to go about this race? How does he want to chase this back? I was actually starting to get a little bit curious if they weren't pitting this long and if they could have made it potentially here, Christian, to maybe 20 laps to go. The soft compound might have been an option.
Yeah, I definitely think that's something that people were looking at. But obviously 28 laps is certainly too short. That's pretty much an ideal run, I would say, on the mediums here. Now, the interesting thing for me is that the gap has pretty much doubled between Pataska and Banfield, but the compounds have obviously switched. And with the lighter fuel and moving a little bit more into the afternoon, so the track temp should begin to drop at least a little bit towards the end of the race. So, at the very minimum, it won't get hotter. This might move the advantage towards Banfield a little bit in terms of how hard he can push those mediums, but it's still difficult. He's going to be closing him down at minimum about 3/10 a lap if he wants a shot at winning.
That is a pretty intriguing call if you were to try that, mind you. In terms of the point for Jake, it is something in other platforms it's tried. Usually leads to a puncture. But we'll see if anyone rolls the dice.
It can do. And I would say that on iRacing, the puncture is a lot more cut and dry than it is on other platforms out there. It's a case of you reach the tire at 0%. That's the point where the tire punctures out here in iRacing. But I would say at this point as well that you can be a little bit more conservative with the way that you can drive. I, for example, drive iRacing on an Xbox controller because I don't have a fixed sim rig in. I tell you what, I go through tires like it's nobody's business. I can go through a soft compound tire in half the time someone driving out their direct drive can. You can be really, really calm with the way that you drive. And this is also the sort of car where if you're getting out of line, you don't actually need much. Ross Banfield sets the fastest lap then of the race, a 106 flat there with that lap time. That's a huge improvement as Thomas Cope dives in from 5th position to make his one and hopefully only stop remaining in this race.
Remember, with the drive-through, this takes him out of the top 5. Thomas Cope with a long way to make up here. Cope taking the medium, so sticking to the same strategy they decided upon coming into the race, it appears. That leaves just 2 to pit. Freitas and Bobrovsky. Oh, by the way, with the controller parts, that does scare me on the racetrack. No offense, Jake. You can tell sometimes who has a controller with the ping, ping, ping as you turn.
Yeah, sometimes you can, but what I'd also say is that you do have the option to set your limits out there on iRacing in terms of how much steering rotation you put in. I put my steering rotation to about 400 degrees of steering. That gives me more than enough to sometimes get away. Where it becomes most noticeable, especially on broadcast, is when you're on a straight and you just hold it dead straight and there's no movement of the steering wheel, whereas someone with force feedback, for example, is going to have those small micro movements as the bumps around this circuit definitely show up when you're driving.
So down to the final 25 laps, coming to 24. Pataska has cycled to the lead by 8.3 seconds with a 10-lap undercut over Ross Banfield. Cope with his stop in 6th because Freitas is coming in for his scheduled position stop. Roski yet to serve his pit stop to be able to make the tire change. But what a run for Pataska it's been today, Christian. Keeping it clean, keeping it consistent. He's built a massive buffer for Banfield to have to eat into over the next 24 laps.
Yeah, and it really started out by having a good start, which obviously his teammate Wasilewski kind of did the opposite there. Wasilewski was in 4th and went pretty much to the back end of the top 10, and it's really cost him because he's 20 seconds off Pataska when his pace has been pretty solid as well. Conway obviously going the opposite way, but back to Pataska. Yeah, but I don't think this is done. Banfield is he's going to close down the gap rapidly to start with, and that's expected. But what's going to be interesting is when we get down to, say, 10 to go, what the gap is, and if it's still closing, because if he goes too hard now, then it's just not going to happen for him. It's one of those strange things where you kind of have to just slowly close the gap down. You don't want to try and take out like 5 seconds in 5 laps because you'll have no tires after 15. So just got to keep an eye on that. He does look like he's slowly chipping away at it. It's come down to about 8 seconds now. But I'm just going to be focusing on what it is with about 10 to 15 to go.
Brodsky, you see, completing the service, by the way. As expected, 4.1, 4.5 seconds, the average for the pit stops today up on the jacks. And you have to say it is lightning quick when it comes to what you see for a pit stop when it comes to Formula 1 Grand Prix competition. It takes a lot of precision, accuracy, to be able to pit a car that quick, that efficiently, to make the 4-tire change simultaneously without any mistakes, Jake.
It takes a lot of crew members as well, and you don't often get that much budget to have that many crew members out there overall. Firstly, you've got 4 people out there on crew to change the tires. You've then got 4 people behind that who's holding the spare, the new tire that's going to go on and needs to hand it over. Joshua Wolf, by the way, 105.9, fastest lap of the race. You've then got on top of that front wing jack man, rear wing jack, all of that goes through, and they are trained and they are pretty much on military time trying to make sure they get as much they can out of the stop, because the most problems can go wrong in there and it's such a minimal time game that they can really go forward. I tell you what the most interesting pit stop though is looking at Super Formula pit stops. They only have 2 jack members or 2 tire guns, one for the front, one for the rear, and it's really funny to see when they go over, they actually flip over the front nose of a Super Formula car to go and get that tire change done, just to try and save as much time as possible.
I'm imagining what you see for stock car racing for a pit stop. by the way, with the two tire, with the two jack.
Oh, it's better. It's better. I mean, it's pretty amazing, the Super Formula pit stop.
Oh, speaking of drivers who've lost a tire, Travis Henderson, he's on two tires on the right side, jacked up because, well, he hit the curbing coming out of Niki Lauda.
Oh, this is the worst feeling, because you go through that section, the car's just going to effectively go right. And it's almost similar to what happened to Lando Norris in practice last year. So he goes over the curb and bang, it just snaps as he goes up through the gear into fourth gear. Nothing you can do about that. What's hurt? Well, it's more than just talent there for Travis Henderson. That is a case of car is damaged, and the question will be whether a fast repair was taken at the stop or not. If it was taken at the stop, then that's it. That's race over.
Have to keep an eye on that as this run continues here for some of these drivers. Still, though, battles are starting to progress on the racetrack a little bit with some of the different groupings. Pataska has kept Bobrovsky within his draft, though. So Bobrovsky one lap down, looking to find a way around on the softs. That's the critical one.
Yeah, this is a bit of an awkward moment here for Pataska, because obviously he is in a fairly close battle strategically with Banfield, so he doesn't really want to let him past here, but at the same time, the soft tires will be faster.
Yeah, that's going to be the major thing. Keep in mind, Wolf last time by exact same lap time nearly as Pataska. Pataska does have the battle for 7th. Walker and Freitas up the road as well to potentially battle with 20 laps to go. Take a look at the other end of the facility meanwhile. This is where Thomas Cope is currently, up the road of Joshua Wolf, who is still the fastest car in some circumstance on the lap on the softs.
So there are still times in this race where you can grab everything back. Pataska, that last time by, lost 0.4 of a second. We got another driver jumping into the pits, and this is what I find rather interesting here. It's Melnarovic in. I think this might be another set of the soft tires potentially going back on. It is. So Melnarovic, another set of softs to get going again. What I found interesting about this race so far, Justin, it's only the TFR Grizzly cars who have gone on to that soft compound tire. They thought they had a strategy that works today, and ultimately, I don't think it's going to work out long term. Yes, they're going to get a lot of time. They might get a top 5 with Melnarovic come the end of this race. In fact, it's looking pretty likely now that a top 5 is there. It just depends on Thomas Cope and how his run later on in this race goes on. But it is a case of, well, if you've got a tyre, you might as well work and use it and make it happen. I'm always reminded of Michael Schumacher's race, the French Grand Prix, where he 4 stopped compared to the 2 stop of pretty much everybody else.
Oh, Pataska spun!
Oh, Pataska, the race leader, has damaged the car. Ross Banfield takes the race lead for the Austrian Grand Prix. Unbelievable as Pataska, who had a sizable lead, has made his first mistake of the day, and it could cost him the race.
It's too aggressive. It's just too aggressive on the turn in the back. Stepped out. Got the contact as well from Travis Henderson, I believe it was, behind. So, actually, no, I'll correct myself. Trevor Bobrovsky, but that is what happens when you are forced to push from a driver behind who's got a lot of pace. Pataska hit the limit too much. Ross Banfield was just slowly eating that time away. That was wonderfully done.
Pataska with the damage now. It's to the side pod and some of the floor. Look at the spin, and there is Bobrovsky right there for the contact.
Yeah, it looked like Bobrovsky may have lost some of his front wing as well there.
That is a race changer.
You can see as well just how wide he was trying to maximize the circuit, and the track really does hitch uphill at Ramus Corner through turn 3. It's uphill on the exit, which makes it very easy if you overshoot just to let the back end step out. And with 18 laps to go, Ross Banfield has been given a gift, and Daz Pataska, a victory here today would have closed that gap right down and would have made this pretty much a dead even championship. Second, still good. He's still got a gap over Jamie Conway, who is in 3rd position right now, but but he can't afford anything more than what's going on right now. Pataska's just got to put that behind him, know that maybe Ross Banfield is out of reach here, but Ross Banfield, crucially in terms of this championship, Justin, is not fighting for overall victory in this season. He had such a poor start to the season that title aspirations are gone. So Pataska knows, okay, that hasn't worked out the way I want to, but it's not the end of the world. I'm still in second.
For reference, if you get the victory today in a single class, that is 250 points in the major series. Second is 225. 155 points currently in position for Campbell, who just came out of the pit lane, with him returning to the racetrack with Dawson Brock's technical problems. So that is how critical one slide back is, and that exact point you came in there for is exactly to the point. Instead, Pataska would be still behind Campbell by single digits, potentially, depending on how things stand, unless the 23 can close up to the 77, or rather, the 777.
And this, I think, is where we'll see if Pataska was maybe managing. I mean, the spin obviously suggests that he wasn't really, but he is on the hard, so he can push hard without having to worry too much about, you know, taking the life out of the tires. But obviously for Banfield, this is really, it couldn't have played out any better for him. He's technically on a better set of tires with only 16 to go, and he has a 3.8 second lead at this point.
Yeah, the pressure definitely has to be on for these drivers now, knowing that with this, the rest of the season could become an absolute dogfight for the championship, to say the very least. Conway's still in that top 3, mind you. Wasilewski is still trying to find a way to close up 3 seconds. This could get very wild, to say the very least. The tough thing for Pataska, though, here, Jake, I think both of us can emphasize, you get floor damage, you get side pod damage. Cordell Cologne goes off the track yet again. But if you get floor pod or side pod or floor damage, it is not a fun time.
No, it really isn't. And people look at a car like this and they see the engine effectively blocked behind and all of the front wing, but they don't realize that just how much of the car's balance comes from the floor, and there's little rivulets that come off of the floor, and there's so much on that floor, and it's more pronounced, I would say, as Sean Campbell just wants to demonstrate that he is the fastest. He's on a soft compound tire, he's just on a 105.4, just to prove that he could put the fastest lap together on the board. But a lot of the car's downforce comes from that floor. A lot of that aero balance is how the car washes through on the floor and around the side pod. So you start really affecting that, you're going to have a really unbalanced car. Not only will you have an unbalanced car, but you're actually going to increase that fuel usage per lap, because the car isn't cutting as effectively through the air. It takes more fuel, more power. Oh, that's a heavy crash. Then going onto the front stretch. Is that Cologne again? Potentially who's had that? Yes, it is. So Cordell Cologne having an absolute nightmare last couple of laps. And this is what we talk about as well, Christian. You've got an idea of it, of hyperheating the tires.
Yeah, that's really what you've got to be careful of, especially if you are out there on the softs. You can accelerate their runaway, basically. And obviously, Cordell's not had the greatest of races so far, and it's kind of just, it's that sausage curb on the outside of turn 1 again. Everyone keeps just clipping their left rear on it, and just, you know, there's not much you can do. It basically is a spin you out block.
David H. Baker's just gone off as well at turn 3 of Ramus, right behind the race leader out there overall. So here's a little look at how that one went wrong. You can see he just comes through, takes the turn right, too much power on the exit, and he does clip the inside guardrail, and you can see the front right disconnected in comparison to the rest of the car, so his car damaged beyond reproach.
Well, he did get a bit lucky because he did shred it off for a minute, and then it came back on. Welcome to iRacing. He does have wing damage, though. Significant wing damage. And he was behind Ross Banfield, which critically means one less car for Banfield to deal with for the next 13 laps to go.
Yeah, and the gap at the front staying fairly static, I would say. It's been kind of going between 3.4 and 3.8 seconds. as we see him coming into the pit lane here to fix that wing.
I'd also like to point out that Sean Campbell has retired the car for a second time out there because he is 13 laps down on his nearest competitor, and there are 13 laps to go.
Able to make sure that he's good to go on that mark, and I think it has to be helpful knowing, too, what's going on with the points. So a lot of different factors coming in, not just the fact that you can't move up the more and more spot, obviously. But in our words, though, Banfield's gap is closing here. And Pataska's trying to do the improbable. Close up with floor damage. He's closed 3/10 the past lap and a half. Is there enough time for Pataska to drive a wounded race car up to the U-Docs car of Banfield?
I'd say there is time for that. It's 3.4 seconds, but he is going up against everything in this race. Ross Banfield has the better tyre for one. He has the better car condition for two. But Daz Pataska, after that sort of spin, after that sort of mistake, I would say might be driving angry right now. And when sim racers get angry, when racers get angry, they find an extra zone out there when they're driving, and they can find a lot more pace where they wouldn't have done originally. It is so incredible to see when a racing driver gets angry, just how quick they can go, how focused, how in the zone they can be, and just how much they can drive with so much power and precision.
It's true. Except there is one additional thing that sometimes comes with that. They then either tend to win the race or crash very spectacularly.
That was going to be the next part. It's so easy, Christian, to take so much of that anger that you jump over top that performance buffer and you go into the rage factor.
Yeah, it's absolutely a thing. And you can see, I mean, he's definitely pushing. I don't know. I feel like at this point, I know it's 3.6 seconds, and I know it seems achievable, but I'd be inclined to just take it. You know, you've already had the big scare. You've got a possibility of losing out so much more. I would just take the points.
See if that message gets to him with the battle for 7th, by the way. Freitas and Bobrovsky are battling. This is one of the packs Ross Banfield has to deal with in the next 11 or so laps to go here, coming up to 10. Depending on the pace, Banfield may have to find a way to pass these drivers while they're fighting for position at the tail end of the lead lap here.
That's going to be a scary prospect. He's got Walker, Bobrovsky, Freitas, Tom Dreiling is in there as well. They've all got to get through that, but the key then is Dreiling gets well out of the way. Freitas versus Bobrovsky. What do you do in this situation? Because they do have that license to battle. Both drivers have the DRS right now. Miguel Freitas has driven a very, very astute race to get to 7th position overall, and Bobrovsky getting right up underneath, trying to search for a way forward. Remember, Bobrovsky, car 10, is on that Red Wall soft compound tyre. That's plain sailing. Goes straight through at the inside of Schlossgold, using all 3 zones of DRS to make sure the move was complete.
410's picked up that time, and here's the major point to consider. Blue flags are to be enforced, meaning if you get lapped, you don't have to slow down, but you have to make it easier to move off the preferred line for the race leaders. That is easier said than done in a position battle. The position battle is breaking up, so that might be what Banfield may want to see here, since he's already dealt with Walker.
Yeah, and I think that this is kind of the only position battle he's going to come across, because the next one is about 20 seconds up the road and there's 4 seconds between them. So if he can clear this without losing too much time, then I think he's safe.
Has to make sure, though, no mistakes on the medium compounded tires. Pataska's hards, 3.1 seconds back, with only Walker in between them for the time being. Banfield hitting a bit of the curbing. Sector 2 has been the slowest part of the track for Banfield compared to Pataska, though. Pataska, despite the damage, has reeled in a majority of his time back to the 777 right down these straightaways.
I tell you what, though, Das Pataska's pushing far too hard at this point. He had 2 wiggles coming out of Ramus' corner. It shows that he is at 100% trying to push, and he took enough time last lap. He took 0.3 of a second almost out there. You can see 0.296, but the overall gain isn't there. He's got to do what he did on lap 62 the entire way home to the end of this race. So I don't think he's got that ability to do that. He does have Ryan Walker in front, so that should be easy plain sailing. And I would say as well, for Dallas Pataska, that might be perfect. He'll get the DRS, then the drag reduction system off of Ryan Walker, and that's going to pull him across an extra half a second on this lap.
Major slowdown in the racing line, but that still helps with the speed. Exactly what you talked about there, Jake. Christian, that helped him gain 0.3 before the braking zone.
Yeah, that's actually what I was going to say, and I'm almost a bit surprised that they didn't do that twice, you know, to let Pataska get towed down this next straightaway as well.
Of note, Conway has been reeled in nearly by Wasilewski as well, so keeping an eye on that as well. Another satellite racing car looking to jump up on the podium. Possibly a 2-3 here if Wasilewski can play this right. Both of them on the same compounded tires. Wasilewski, 1 lap overcut compared to Conway.
Jamie Conway's driven a really good race, but so too is Ryan Wasilewski, and Wasilewski took 0.3 that last lap. He's slowly closing that gap back in. They tip it into Jochen Rindt at turn 9, so easy to run wide through that section. Then through the final corner, they are really pushing each other to that limit, and this is where I think you need to be very clever and astute as a driver. If you have any instant points left to use, you may as well use them up to 14. So if they have been very, very conservative with the way they've been running in this race, now would be the time I'd start considering, if I'm Wasilewski, if I'm even Jamie Conway, just push a little bit more. And Conway gets full drift spec coming up through Ramus. Needed all of the work of the rear tires. Of course, these cars rear-wheel drive because it's very heavy to put four-wheel drive in a car like this. And he now is starting to defend into Sloshko corner. This is really starting to become Conway trying to defend as much as he possibly can.
And I'm surprised he went for the defense there. I didn't feel like it was necessary, and it's not hurt him too much because Wasilewski is not able to follow him too well through the mid part of the lap. But I felt he seems like he's worried when the gap's bigger than it, you know, he's not under threat there.
For now, down to 6 to go. Of note, in the race lead conversation, Banfield is just about in the draft, and in fact is of the lap traffic. Up in front is Freitas. That may be helpful because he's gained a bit of time. In fact, he's gained a couple tenths on Pataska since reaching the traffic and the DRS.
He's crucially got that gap back up over 3 seconds right now, and I think this will be a case here for Das Pataska of some white flag waving at this point. There's not much he can do. He's just got to keep it on the island. Don't do anything silly. And his race will be second position, and it's still a good haul of points for second place. I wouldn't be complaining about second position as Josh Wolf sets the fastest lap, 105.402. Of course, Josh Wolf is 2 laps down right now and isn't really racing for much here in this one, aside from his 12th place. But Ross Banfield, I think, is safe, barring a mistake. And we know how this circuit's been working out today here at the Red Bull Ring. It has found mistakes, and it's found mistakes often.
And here's the critical thing. Incident points of conversation with under 5 laps to go. You mentioned if you use them, you can try and push. But Pataska doesn't necessarily have that option here with the 4X picked up with the contact. So that's the balancing act, too. If you've been a bit too argy-bargy, you can lose that. Jake.
Yeah, Wasilewski just having a huge drift up at Ramus corner, and that's dropped him back a good 2-3 tenths of a second. So Wasilewski's pushing a bit too hard. Conway is using that middle sector flawlessly to keep Wasilewski at bay.
Yeah, Conway definitely looks like he's better through the middle here. Wasilewski just not able to follow him closely enough, and crucially, that means that he's not ever really getting any attempts down into turn 3. And I say that because he's not close enough on the front stretch. So then even if he has the DRS to turn 3, he's never close enough to make good use of it.
See everybody using the runoff. Washaleski has reached the incident limit. Washaleski drive through penalty.
That's a killer. That is an absolute killer. It's with 4 laps to go as well, and he will feel really hard done by that because he's driven a really strong race to get back up, and ultimately his race is going to be pretty much dropped back. The good news with that drive-through penalty is it's not going to lose him a position because Thomas Cope is 27 seconds back. Lane transit, it is such a late commitment cone here at the Red Bull Ring that you can effectively take that drive-through penalty and lose maybe only 10 to 15 seconds by just transiting through the lane without taking a stop. So that'll be good news. One thing I am a little bit curious about, was surprised today to see only 16 runners. This is the sort of series out there in terms of iRacing officials that only just yesterday had their highest strength of field race of the season of a 5,700 strength of field. So I was expecting maybe a couple drivers from the open wheel community to jump in, give themselves a go here at 71 laps, but ultimately no dice. I am looking forward to it. In comes Washaleski.
So there's the drive-through for Washaleski. The focus now to the leaders. 3 laps to go. Down to 2.5 seconds, the gap for Pataska to Banfield. Make it 2.4 with a car to potentially get a DRS off of now in Freitas. Pataska watching as Banfield has kind of plateaued on this run. Last time by, he picked up another 10th and a half nearly to gain back up to the 777.
Yeah, Vavrovsky is far enough ahead of Banfield to not really be slowing him down, but he's also not close enough to be giving him the DRS. The problem for Pataska really is that he's got Freitas in between that he's going to need to clear. Yes, he's going to get the DRS, but it's still going to take him a little bit of time to do that, and the time just isn't available.
Especially with 2 laps to go, about 2 minutes 10 seconds on the average in terms of what we've seen on the pace today. To find a way to close up 2 full seconds. Can Pataska find a miracle? Wish upon a star to get it. Now, up in front, Banfield using every bit of runoff area to gain any bit of time he can.
Needs to, and this is crucial. The gap at 2.1 seconds. If within 1 second of Miguel Freitas goes down as Pataska, you'd sense that he'll get himself every opportunity. On that last lap, he'll have to hope for it and close it down, but I don't think it's going to be that case. Banfield, I think, is trying to play minimal risk at this point in time, not want to throw anything away in these late stages. It has been a great race by Ross Banfield. He has just quietly got about with it, hasn't needed to make an overtake out on track to get the position that he's needed. Yes, he fought with Thomas Cope early on, but once he got free, this has been his race. And I tell you what, 777, it's been a jackpot-style drive from him so far, and he's soon coming up after he passes there through Rint, Red Bull Mobile, and onto this front stretch. He will see the white flag being waved by Barney.
Final time around for the Austrian Grand Prix. Behind them, more troubles popping up. This is Walker. Walker slow, all while Banfield leading by just under 2 seconds now and closing down Pataska. Pataska not in the DRS range of any of these cars. Bobrovsky in the DRS range for Banfield moves quickly to the right. Banfield half a lap away from victory.
Yeah, and crucially got the DRS there. It's going to make life easy for him. Pataska 2 cars in between. Only a huge mistake really from Banfield can take it away from him now.
And he's been able to take advantage of one major mistake from Dallas Pataska. One spin coming out of turn 3 has cost Pataska a race victory here at Austria. The Red Bull Ring, in turn, will be conquered by one driver from UDocs. Ross Banfield looks to keep it clean for one more corner. The Austrian Grand Prix comes to a close. It's Ross Banfield who takes the checkered over Dallas Pataska by 1.3 seconds.
That would be a little bit deceptive how close that gap is at the end. Ross Banfield absolutely drove his cotton socks off today. Deserved that victory, earned that through sheer consistent pace, especially in that early stint on the hard compound tyre. It was a great race as well for Jamie Conway, who finishes in 3rd. Washaleski will take 4th ahead of Thomas Cope in 5th. And Cope is not going to be a million miles ahead of David Melnarovic, whose very aggressive strategy call here today has effectively got him to 6th place. And I tell you what, only 6 finishes on the leading lap just shows you how much of a skill that you need to have to drive this machine. You're inside 1 lap, you're 1 second a lap slower, or you're within 1 second a lap of your leader. So it just goes to show you just how quick you need to be to stay on the leading lap here at the Red Bull Ring.
Last of the drivers have crossed the line. In turn, Ross Banfield with the cool down lap in this one. What a run for Banfield. He is still going at full pace. And now he gets to celebrate. So what a run for the Udox machine, who gets to burn it down with a win in Austria after what started off to be a rough beginning of the year, Christian. Finally, he breaks through after what was such a nightmare to begin the year.
Yeah, it really was. If you think back to Daytona, it was... I think he felt extremely bad about what happened there, and then since then he's... he's just quietly kind of plugged away at it, and here today, I mean, the pace, even without Pataska's mistake, the pace was there, Like, it wasn't like he looked into this or anything like that. He had enough pace that I think he was going to be able to trouble Pataska at the end of the race anyway. And he just drove a great race. I saw his qualifying time last night, and I thought it was really, really impressive. And then obviously today again, he backed it up with race pace, and he deservedly won the race. I think it's a performance he should be extremely happy with.
Let's take a look at your unofficial race results after what was a strong one today for many drivers throughout this pack. How close did some of these drivers get, by the way? The lowest incident point, David Baker with 5. Banfield got 10. Dallas Pataska had 12 at the end. Ross Banfield picks up the victory by 1.3 seconds over Dallas Pataska, with 3rd spot going to Jamie Conway, 12 seconds behind. Wachaleski, who had a drive-through, still finished in 4th over Thomas Cope, who had a drive-through as well. Erwich finishes in 6th after trying a different strategy call. Then a lap down for Broski, Freitas, Walker, and Baker. Your top 10, Jake.
And then moving over the page then into 11th position. These drivers, multiple laps down or retirees. So Cordell Cologne, Joshua Wolf, Tom Dreiling, Travis Henderson, all 4 of them, TFR Grizzly, not having a good day. And this will be one of those which they will just put in the box and say, we're not going to talk about that one. This is not the sort of race we want to see. Sean Campbell, 30 laps down, will be marked on at the end. He says he's got about a 36-point gap at the top, so that gap cut down by over 2/3 today. That'll be a little bit scary moving on to the next round of the season. The final retiree being Dawson Brock. We believe that was a throttle issue out there on track, and a real shame for the 83 to find a non-finish here today at the foot of the Styrian Mountains.
Especially after the speed shown in the last open wheel race. Already standing by, Ross Banfield from Victory Lane here today. Ross, you win in Austria. How does it feel to come away with the victory after what started off as a rough campaign has now turned into a strong recovery with your first victory of 2022?
It feels pretty good to finally be back on the board. Definitely needed this. It's been a rough year, to say the least. So always feels good, especially when I win in one of my stronger cars.
It was talked about where you had the pace potentially to reel in Pataska with the different tire compound strategy towards the end of this race. And then the spin happens for Pataska. What was that reaction like knowing that happened? And what would have happened if that didn't happen, in your opinion, with the reel-in attempt?
Oh, he would have won hands down. The tires were starting to fall off towards the last 4 or 5 laps. I was trying to stay out a couple extra laps, but I saw the lap traffic and decided to pit in, which I'm glad. But yeah, it was definitely Dallas's race if he didn't spin, because my tires were about to fall off in the last 3 or 4 laps.
What was the reaction then?
Oh, it was a chance. I knew I had a shot, and I just knew I had to hold off that gap, because once he got DRS, it was kind of game over. So it was just trying to keep him out of DRS range.
How are your skills on dirt? Because that's the next round for Modified Mayhem.
They're okay, I guess. I'm not really a specialist when it comes to dirt, but I think all of us are kind of in a similar boat there, so it should be fun.
Anyone you want to thank or give a shout out to after this one?
Yeah, the guys over at UDocs just been, pretty supportive. It's been fun running with them this week. I think we did a great job on the set. And then, yeah, you guys for the broadcast.
Congratulations, Ross, on the victory today.
Thanks, guys.
That's Ross Banfield coming away with the W today by 1.3 seconds over Dallas Pataska. Third spot is standing by with Jake Sperry. It's Jamie Conway with the podium.
Jamie, that would have been a little bit worrying behind the way that Ryan was closing in on you, but a penalty for him meant that you had the luxury and liberty today to stroll back home. An important drive, especially considering in terms of the way that your race had gone today, that you started in 10th position. How crucial was it to make all those places early and deal with the battle at the very end of the race?
Yeah, wow, what a race. Firstly, huge congrats to Ross. He had so much pace in this car. It's obviously, I just heard him saying it's one of his specialities, so a really huge congrats to him. Yeah, unfortunately I didn't get much time to practice this week and sort of jumped into qualifying a bit blind, but knew that I needed to get the start down, and I don't know, jumped about 5 cars or something. It was ridiculous. But Ryan huge at the end. I didn't know he was on for a penalty until he disappeared about 2 laps to go. But I was having to use all the tricks in the car. It's the first time I've driven this car. I've never raced the car before. So yeah, managing the energy and all the rest of it. But well done to him. He nearly got me at the end there. I think he would have done if he hadn't had that penalty. But yeah, good race.
Absolutely. And in terms of keeping yourself in the right position over the course of what is a long season, a difficult season, chopping and changing the cars all the time, you find yourself 3rd place. You consolidate your position in 3rd place now after that result. And in terms of how you go out and approach each round and approach each race, this might be probably the quickest car out there to drive, one of the most difficult cars out there to drive. So to come away with a podium here, just how important is it to you to say that, you can jump about pretty much every vehicle and stay very, very competitive here in European Split?
Yeah, that's right. I'm really pleased with the result today. Like I say, it's not a car I've driven. It's a circuit I know well. Got the win here in the Ivor Endurance Series before Christmas in the LMP2 for Apex Tech Racing. So it's a track I know really well in downforce cars, but I didn't expect to get a P3. I'm really pleased with that. Obviously, Ross is closing the gap still behind me in the championship in P4. But yeah, we'll see. Unfortunately, I can't make the dirt round next time out, which is a real shame. But I'll definitely be back for the rest of it. So hopefully the drop weeks will carry me there, but we'll have to wait and see.
So we're skipping away then from a bit of dirt, but we are rapidly approaching the final stages of the championship. Of course, it's been a championship that's been going on very early on in the season. Just one thing, a lot of championships out there are very quick. They're 2-month, 3-month championships where you're very much in and you're quickly getting through. How differently do you go and approach a championship like this, which is all year?
Oh, it's a tough question. It's really hard to maintain the consistency. I get the impression I don't think I spend quite as much time on the service as some of the other guys. No discredit to them, or anything like that. But it's really hard to keep that consistency. And I've found for the last few rounds, I've been, I haven't been able to do anything in between time. So really getting it going again before each round has been quite tricky. I'm really keen got some good combos coming up. The trucks on the road course is going to be good, and also the classic Daytona as well. I'm looking forward to those two, so hopefully I'll be able to get a bit more prep done for those. But yeah, we'll see.
We certainly will. Floor is yours though, Jamie. Anyone you'd like to thank?
Yeah, it's been a while. I thought I'd pop in, say hello, but huge thanks as ever to Apex Technologies. Apex Tech Racing Supply is up and running now, so if you're based in America, go check us out. Supplying SimRacing hardware imported from Europe, so that's what they're doing now. So big congrats to EJ, Ryan for getting that off the ground. Yeah, and hopefully some of the teammates will be back later in the season. We'll have to see. But yeah, and thanks for the great broadcast as ever.
No worries at all there. Jamie Conway finishing 3rd position there, just in a charge. Pretty much as good today as what Cameron Smith's been doing at St. Andrews.
Yes, indeed. And Christian, your final thoughts, first of all, on what we've seen here today at the picturesque Red Bull Ring here in Spielberg.
Well, I would say that obviously the big casualty from the event was Sean Campbell. He's going to have lost a lot of points to Dallas Pataska, but Pataska himself is small mistake cost him the opportunity to pick up the win and you know, actually overhaul that points gap. But I really got to give it to Ross Banfield. I mean, he took a lot of flack after what happened at Daytona, and he's kind of just put his head down since then, and that's going to be, I believe, his 4th win in the Major Series, and I believe it's the first one I've seen from him in the Euro region for a while. So a great race ran by him, a totally well-deserved victory, and now the series is going to go to something that's just completely different. You know, it's dirt mods at Wheat Sport. It really couldn't be further apart.
Yeah, that's going to be an interesting one for some. I'm keeping my eye on particular Josh Wolf with his dirt experience there, but Jake, your thoughts on what we've seen here today in these Formula 1 Grand Prix machines? What a run today for Banfield indeed.
I think we found proof today that it's a difficult car. It's always going to be a difficult car. It's going to be one of the toughest on the service. And there's a reason why it's locked behind the A license, because you do need to be the most safe with it to have that opportunity to give that chance to drive. I think that today it was about who could stay calm, who could keep the car most balanced, and who could keep it off the curbs the most. And I think all 3 of them came into the form of Ross Banfield, and he was honestly the most deserving winner out of everyone today. It'll be completely different next time out, so expect the form book to be up on its head.
Indeed, we'd like to thank you for tuning in for today's coverage. We'd like to remind you as well that the Majors is sponsored by Majors Garage, home of free Baseline Plus setups. Get your help from any of the garage coaches 24/7. Sign up now for affordable monthly subscriptions, telemetry, coaching, and more at majorsgarage.com. Or use the special discount code MajorsGSRC for 10% off. Keep the link in the description below that directly applies to our special offer. Also give a shout out to the charity in support for today, Tunnel to Towers Foundation, as well as thank the companies who provide the software and hardware here for our broadcast listed up on screen. Additional thanks go to Jude Lawn, who provides our wonderful music. See the screen for how to get a hold of more of our great work. Thanks to today's team once more, and Jake, Christian, Zach, and Dougie. You can find out more about GSRC at globalsimracingchannel.com or through our social media listed on screen. Be sure to check out our merchandise store at gsrc.storeandviewmind.com. We keep you a link in the description below. And don't forget to subscribe to the YouTube channel as well so you don't miss a moment here on GSRC. The next race, as talked about for the Major Series, late August. That will be Modified Mayhem. It's a wild card round. 3 different types of modifieds utilized by the 3 different regions of the Major Series when it comes to Weed Sports Speedway. Be sure to tune in for the European Pro Split once more at 11:45 a.m. Eastern Time on the 21st of August. The Majors American region, remember, is still hitting the racetrack tonight for their own GP. That will start off coverage at approximately about 7:30-ish p.m. Eastern Time on GSRC for pro coverage. Be sure to see how things fare out here in Spielberg. Once again, 8 p.m. for the green flag. We also have upcoming races for other series listed on screen, so be sure to check those out and mark them down your calendar. Until next time, race clean, race hard, and we'll see you on the track.